Hey everyone, welcome to GMAT Club surprise session. We haven't really planned this. This came up on spot after MBA Spotlight because we were getting a lot of comments on echo. Um, and we really wanted to dig deep into profile evaluations, and we did a bunch of them on chats during MBA Spotlight. But we felt that those are really good on YouTube as well. We get to learn more details, and we get to talk to applicants directly. And so today is one of those. We have done a few of these with experts and admission consultants in the past, and I always considered myself a pseudo expert. So I thought, cool, I'll chime in too. So again, if you don't know me, I'm Souvik. I just finished graduating from the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, and just moved to Seattle to start my first post MBA job. Just finished 2 weeks at Amazon as a product manager in AWS. So it's been a pretty overwhelming ride so far, but it's been really good too. So with me, I have 4 applicants from India, and they're all applying to business school this year. So I'm going to let them introduce yourself. But before you do, just want to follow like a really quick structure for introduction. So tell me your name, tell me where you're from in India, and then tell me a little bit more about your journey. And it could be, like when did you start thinking about business school? What kind of work you have done, what work you're currently doing. Fully respect confidentiality and privacy, so you don't really have to name your companies. That's totally fine. And then talk a little bit about your plan, what kind of schools you're applying to in 2021 or in the 2020-2021 admission cycle. And what's the game plan? What's the strategy here? What do you think is going well for you? What do you think you should or can improve on? So I'll start with you, Vashish, and then we'll move clockwise. So go ahead, go for it.
Hi folks. I am Vashisht. I am from Hyderabad in India. I am a data engineer by profession. I'm 25 years old, so I've been working for almost 3.5 years now. I am looking to apply to ISB and NUS primarily. My decisions are more or less based on the conditions that are actually prevailing around the world at the moment. While I'm looking at a few global colleges, I am inclined towards keeping them more towards home at the moment. So that's the reason. That's the reason behind ISB and NUS at this point of time. So I've appeared for my GRE, and I've got a 325, and I'm hoping to improve on that score, considering how
Sure.
competitive it might get this year. Uh, that's something which I'm looking at. What I'm particularly I'm a little what perturbs me a little bit is the rates of deferrals that have been happening and how that might play
Mhm.
out in the next class. That's something that's of some concern, especially considering that I am a typical male IT engineer. So that's something that's playing that's taken some space in my head at this moment. So yeah.
Sure. Okay, awesome. That makes sense. Thanks for the intro. That's perfect. That's basically what we're looking for. And yeah, Karthik, you're up next.
Hi there, my name is Karthik Nimbalkar. I'm pretty active on the GMAT Club as the name Business Conqueror. I'm from Bhopal, the city of lakes. Other than roaming around the city, enjoying the particular landscapes, I really work for a real estate development company as my full-time job. And addressing my entrepreneurial drive, I think I am currently working in pro bono for 5 of the entrepreneurial ventures, out of which I have learned a lot and built a broad repertoire. Last year, I got into Georgetown University, McDonough School of Business, but it couldn't really play out because of the whole financial situation. And Souvik did make a video on that about how to convince your parents for that. So thank you for that. And I really am looking to apply into Harvard this year. And because of my GMAT score, I believe my profile is a bit weak. And other than that, I have been a leader my whole life. So I think on that front, I'm fine. So I'm working towards my GMAT. And if I improve on that, I will definitely apply to Harvard this year.
Can you give me a ballpark estimate of your GMAT score? Like, you don't have to be super accurate, but what kind of scores are you getting on the
Uh,
GMAT or the practice tests?
on the practice test, I have achieved like 730 to 760 range scores. But
Hmm.
on my test day, I'm like, I don't want to make an excuse, but I'm really allergic to dust. So in
Sure.
India, the test centers are not really that great. So that kind of kicked in, and I got a 700 eventually. So
Got it. And you have only taken it once in the actual test center?
no, twice. And
Got it.
the first time was the mistake, but the second time was like not my fault. Mostly.
Awesome. That makes sense. What about you, Varun?
Thanks for the opportunity, Souvik. Hey everyone, my name is Varun. I am 28. I'm based out of Gurgaon. Although I'm a computer engineer by training, but I've spent all my life working in the social impact space. So currently, I work with one of the top social impact consulting firm of India, and as an engagement manager, I help clients design their CSR strategies, work in social impact, design their social impact strategy, and scale their impacts programs and stuff like that. The idea was the idea or the journey that with which I started was to actually use technology in the social impact space, and that is what I intend to further through an MBA. And the reason
Right.
I am applying it now is after 2 years of dilly-dallying, because consulting seems to be really hectic. I didn't really get any time to apply to B school. So finally this year I'll be applying in round one. I already have a GMAT of 740. I am looking to
Okay.
improve that further in the next 1.5 month. If I'm able to do that, well and good. Otherwise, I'll apply with that 740. The schools that I'm looking at in that order is Stanford, Wharton, MIT Sloan, Yale, and Kellogg.
Okay.
So
Sounds
that's
good.
a couple of things I want to highlight in terms of challenges that I'm facing. So in terms of profile, I feel I am pretty secure that I have a decent profile. I have a bunch of national, international extracurriculars, bunch of stuff that I've been doing all through. So in that sense, I'm pretty secure. But because of this entire COVID situation and how things have really changed now and all the deferrals that are happening all around, so I'm a bit unsure whether a 740 would even hold. Considering while I do have a social impact experience, it's
Right.
still a male Indian IT engineer, right? So
Sure.
these are the challenges, and also what is that right fit for a college when you talk about entrepreneurship, social impact, and technology? Considering
Right.
in the short term,
Okay.
I would want to pivot to product management and then move to entrepreneurship in the long term.
Got it. No, sure, that makes sense. I'm happy to share my thoughts on that. Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. But Sanket, by the way, great home office. I wish my home office is my living room, so you're in a better shape than I am. But go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Sanket. I'm 29. I'm from Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. I am a software engineer. I worked with a startup for a few months, but then the startup didn't take off, and eventually I started my own. So since last 6.5 years, I have co-founded a SaaS company. We have a few CRM, ERP products for various business verticals, and more about 200 clients in the city. The problem I have been facing is that I have been unable to sort of achieve expansion. That's when I thought I should get an MBA. I applied last year. I got into a couple of schools of my choice, but now due to COVID, I think I will have to opt for a deferral. So this year
Right.
again, I'm going with an idea that perhaps I can reapply with a better
Awesome.
score.
Can you share a little bit about your test score?
My GMAT is 670. So this, and I tried it like 3 times, but I have been unable to improve my verbal. So
Sure.
this time around, I am thinking of applying with GRE. So in a couple of months, I have started prepping. I guess I'll take GRE in a couple of months.
Right. Awesome. That makes sense. Thanks for quick introductions. I think this helps me sort of try to understand what direction this session is going to go. And again, I fully expect this expect this to go on for a while, but I'll try to cap the discussion maybe like under 45 minutes and try to offer my thoughts on what I think is going on. So a couple of things. Just basically, these are like hygiene stuff as Indian ID male. I will say though, like the biggest hurdle for Indian ID engineers or Indian ID male engineers, and it doesn't have to be IT. If you're an Indian male engineer, you're doomed automatically, regardless of whether you're a civil engineer or an IT engineer or whatever, right? The thing is, what I've seen in business schools across, mostly in the US, that the greatest hurdle is actually getting in. Once you're in, it actually works massively in your favor. If you have done any sort of engineering, and especially if you have done a fair amount of programming or system design, it has a huge advantage in getting into product roles in tech, or getting into supply chain roles in tech, or even like things like consulting, things like anything else. It's very advantageous to have you have an analytical background. So, and again, so the gatekeeping, that's the biggest hurdle. The second thing is, unfortunately, like test score is super important, and it's just sad that it is so important, but it just is. Just to throw you guys quick stats, and I've shared this in my videos on GMAT Club before, that at Ross, which is by no means a top business school, I mean it's top 10-ish, but it's not like top 3. At Ross, the average GMAT for Indians in my class, the class of 2020, was close to 750 to 760, between that range for Indian males. And the lowest GMATs for Indian males in my class was 730, and there was only one person who had a 730, but he had a really impressive profile, worked for Google, etc. So he didn't have an issue anywhere else. But unfortunately, the guy who had a 730, Ross was the only school that he got into. He applied to a bunch of schools. He had a really strong profile, and Ross was the only school that he got in. You know what? Let me rephrase. I think there were two with 730. The other guy, I think, worked at a very top consulting firm, definitely MBB, before applying. And again, Ross was the only school that he got into. Then after 730, I think we had maybe one or two 740s, and that's it. So out of like 30 odd Indian males, there were like 3 people in total with a less than 750 GMAT score. Everybody else was 750 and above. So I had a GMAT of 760, but I think I was like under the average for Indian ID males, which is crazy. Now, why I want to mention this is mid-tier schools, and again, Ross is in no way mid-tier; it's definitely top. But let's say that in the top 20 spectrum, which definitely some of you guys are considering applying to, Ross is at the median, like right? Let's say rank 1 to 20 on US News. Ross is a solid footing between like 8 to 12 in that zone. If that is the average GMAT at Ross, I don't expect things to be a whole lot different in other schools. And it's especially for a school like Yale, I expect it to actually be higher, because I think Yale has a slightly higher average GMAT. And for schools like Stanford and maybe Wharton, the things would be brutal. I think it will be even more. So that's just a quick background. So unfortunately, test scores become really, really important. Wait, sorry, my computer misbehaved. I don't know if you guys could see me. But so yeah, so test scores are super important. So, I think, Varun, you said you have a 740. I think 740 is a great score. I think once you reach 740, even as an Indian IT male, the returns of working really hard to get it to a 750 or a 760 is not super high. I think you have a very interesting profile. You have done engagement multiple parts of the world, so I think you're in a slightly better shape. But Karthik, I will say though, like without 740 GMAT, your top schools will be tough, man. Like it's going to be tough with at like no fault of yours. It's just going to be tough because of how things are and how things generally end up being. But with that said, there are certain exceptions of low GMAT score, like the 730 guys in Ross, or there are women at Ross with like a 710, a 720. Very few, but they are there. So I wanted to share a little bit about what they did, or how they did well. So anyway, so with that like grim standardized test background, I wanted to ask you, think about like one question that you had coming into this session, and one question that you wanted to ask me, or like just discuss or share thoughts on. We'll go around the room and just answer like the biggest question that you have about MBA admission. So let's go other way around. Sankit, I'll start with you. Tell me something that is really bothering you. Tell me something that you want definitely answers to.
Yeah, so this is not regarding prep or my profile, but in general, we are seeing that lot many people are deferring. So say 50% of the candidates are deferring. So are we only looking at the rest of the 50 slots that we will be competing for? And history
Right.
says that more people apply due to economic downturn. So is this
Right.
going to be the most competitive intake, and does that mean that applying to round one becomes even more important? And will they sort of admit candidates in the same
Sure.
proportion in each round, or like how do you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go one by one so that I don't lose track of questions. It's a good question, and we asked that question to almost all the schools which came on MBA Spotlight, and some of them had clear answers, some of them did not. But what we got from generally speaking to them is the class size overall will not change. So even if they have given deferrals to, let's say, 100 people, 200 people for HBS or something, the class size will largely stay the same. Which like if you do basic arithmetic, which means the odds are a lot lower this year to get into round one. But there are a lot of different assumptions at play. You are assuming, by I don't mean you, but generally, when you say that it's going to be a lot more difficult to get into business school this year, you're assuming that all the deferrals are going to convert. All the deferrals are going to go back to that business school, which I doubt. A lot of people will completely scrap the idea of going to business school because of what's happening. Immigration has been really challenging in the US, so that puts even more uncertainty and anxiety. So people may not go because of those reasons. The other thing also is this is one of the things that people like to think about as like a pastime. It's like an anxiety pastime. I'll give you an analogy. When we were recruiting, and recruiting is a really stressful part of business school experience because there's so much on the line. Like if you don't get a job on campus, you feel like you're doomed. You're not, but you feel like you're doomed. And then you constantly look at last year's data from the previous year. How many people, how many Indians got into MBB? How many Indians got into Google, etc.? And then you unnecessarily surround yourself with these thoughts. I mean, which it's an interesting pastime, but it doesn't do anything for you because you literally have no control over this. So I would say, like, look, deferrals definitely mean that things will be harder for you and like all three of you and everybody else, all four of you, and everybody else who is applying. But that is not something that you can control. Are you going to change your decision on the school that you're applying to based on their deferral policy? No, you're going to apply to that school anyway. So I would say let's keep our fingers crossed that things are not more difficult. But Sanket, I'm sorry, you have no skin in this game. All you can do is make sure your GMAT or GRE is super good, your application is well done, your resume stands out, your essays are not awful. I have a theory that all you need to do are those things. You don't need to be Mark Twain to get into business school.
Right.
Anyway, Varun, go ahead. What's your burning question?
Yeah. So thanks, Sanket, for asking that question. So that takes one off the list. I would say the second important question that I had was, so when B schools apparently look at your profiles and they sort of bucket you into different groups, what's the
Sure.
criteria
Yeah.
that's used? What's the criteria that's used to bucket profiles? And similarly
Right.
linked to that, what would be that best strategy to differentiate your profile in the next 2 months, considering that round one would be about roughly 2 months from now?
Sure. Good. Again, valid question, and this is a very universal question. It doesn't depend on COVID, immigration, quarantine stuff. Good. It depends. The problem is the answer to most difficult question is it depends. Um, it depends on different schools. Like different schools have very different filtration process. So I know the filtration process for some schools, and I don't know the filtration process for some other schools. But also these things also change every year. Like every year, the admissions team and the program team will sit down and discuss and figure out if they need to change the way they look at applicants. But I can tell you that in one very popular top three business school that I've had the chance to interact with students who did admissions, what they told me is schools often filter by region first, right? So you will sort of compete. I'm going to put compete in quotes, but you'll sort of compete with everybody else in your region, and then and then there's another filter on gender. So you compete with the Indian dudes, while Indian women get benchmarked across other Indian women, and then there is there, then there are filtration, but it's not super high because then things become subjective. Then things becomes quality of work experience, test scores, and then how well prepped you are for business school. So that's sort of answer to the first part of your question, like how do filtrations work. The second part, like how to stand out, is really tough. Like I would say going above the bare minimum is definitely a good way to stand out. And I'll give you a business school recruiting experience. When companies come to campus, this becomes a very common question that, hey, how do I stand out to recruiters? Like, how do I impress recruiters? And I think it's a very similar process in business school. So you go to an event, like let's say a reception or like an office visit or something like that, where let's say you have 70, 80 Rossers or any other business school, and you have 10 reps in the company, ranging from like a junior associate or like a senior consultant all the way to like a partner, right? And people often say like, okay, I'm going to go talk to that partner. I'm going to go talk to that consultant, that engagement man. I'm going to talk to everybody, right? And that's often like the bad way to do it, because nobody really remembers you. Nobody expects to remember you. So one rule that people follow is that if they remember you, they're going to remember you for the wrong reason. If only like you get drunk or you make an idiot out of yourself, they're going to remember you. So the best way to go is for them to not remember you, but know that you were there. And so one of the ways for them to know that you were there is that you have registered for this. You have said hi to some people. You have sent some follow-up emails thanking them for their time, and that's it. Like just go slightly above the bare minimum, and I think that works. Um, some schools end up being like super networking heavy. Like some schools, I would put Ross in that category, Fuqua in that category, Tuck in that category. Like they appreciate if you have done some reach out. So talk to students and let them know that you have talked to students. So when you meet admissions in your city or you're doing a virtual event, let them know that, hey, I spoke to this person. It was great. I wanted to follow up on this question, and just show interest. I think that's a really cool way. You will be surprised at how many people don't even attend a single session by the school and expect to get an interview. I mean, sure, you can get interviews without attending any of these sessions, but your chances are a lot higher if you actually like show interest and they have evidence of your interest. The other way to do that is to like maintain a relationship with the admissions people. So try to send them emails, and you'll be surprised. Like sometimes just sending them emails and letting them that, hey, I'm super interested. I'm looking forward to applying. I had these questions. Can you connect me with someone, or can we get on a phone call? And they often like it, especially if you're targeting that in a non-busy session. It'll work out just great. So these are like sort of the networking way to stand out. The other ways to stand out is to actually work hard on what they're asking you to do. So don't do your resume for more than a page. Use a one-page resume, but show your accomplishments in your resume. A ton of people will sort of have their resume, which is like a bulleted list of their job description. Don't do that. Just by highlighting your accomplishment, you're standing out already, because a lot of people, Indians especially, are not going to put in a lot of effort. But if you do, you're going to stand out. Don't make typos on your essays. Like the bare minimum, just go above that a little bit. Answer the essay question. So I think these are all good ways. But we can come back to that. What are some of the other ways to stand out? But hope that answers some of your questions, Varun.
It does, Souvik. Thank you.
Awesome. Karthik, let's go.
Yeah, mostly I was worried about the brand value and how much business schools value that. For example, like the Indian IITians, also have a greater chance
Sure.
of getting into the business schools because they have dual brand values, because they will be recruited by the companies, the big four or some companies like that. They can have international exposure, but an
Right.
above average Indian applicant without any international exposure, without any opportunities, how can they present themselves to these business schools and show them that they are equivalent to them?
Yeah, it's tough because IITs hold a lot of weight, and rightfully so. People have given a lot of blood and sweat and sacrificed social lives to get into an IIT. It's fair for them to be rewarded for those things, but at the same time, like you shouldn't be judged by a test that you did well when you were like 17, 18 years old. That sounds a little stupid. Um, I think there is no easy way to do this. If you went to an, I think there are a ton of IITs right now, so a lot of them are not as great as some of them. Like when I was, in like college age, I think I'm a lot older than you guys, but IIT Kanpur and IIT Kharagpur were the best IITs. And then when I got into college, IIT Delhi and Bombay became the best IITs. I don't even know which IITs are good and which of them are bad now. But the point is having IIT and big brand name in your resume is extremely helpful, not only for business school, but also when you end up recruiting, because people just love brand names because most of these brand name companies, they have strong recruiting structures, and it sort of acts as a validation that, oh, if you were hired by this company and they may have done the due diligence about you, then we don't have to do it. It's like a form of laziness. I'll give you examples from my business school experience. I didn't have a lot of brand names. Like I went to Jadavpur. I don't know if you know the college. It's a really good state college. It's not an IIT though. I would say it's like top 12, top 15. When I was applying, maybe top 10. And then I worked for Siemens, which is a big electrical engineering company, which was the strongest brand name I had. And then I had Teach for India, which is like a big not-for-profit, and that's pretty much it. I worked in startups, so I did not have great brand names. Ross took a flyer on me, and I had high GMAT scores, and I networked really well. So I got into Ross, Talkstern, waitlisted at Sloan, eventually converted that waitlist, but it was super late. And I got into a few other schools, Foster, McCombs, whatever. But I had difficulties. I didn't get an interview from Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton. Or yeah, I got an interview from Booth, but they rejected me. So anyway, so Booth was the toppest school who sort of was willing to take a chance on me without brand name. So because I didn't have brand name and I wasn't going to go get it because I was applying, I can't like leave my job and try to get a job in like a big company or whatever. I tried to do everything else right, and I think that's a good way. So if you don't have brand name, try to have a checkbox in everything else. I think test score, great resume, great essays. Because if you don't have brand name, people will think about your essays more. If you do have IIT and like McKinsey in your resume, maybe you can get away with weaker essays. But if you don't have those things on your resume, then your essays need to be like solid. People need to love you. And the other example of how this thing sort of plays out is when I was recruiting for uh, like companies for my summer internship. I was doing consulting and tech. Those were the two industries I was focused on, and I didn't get a bunch of interviews. I got like 6, 7 interviews. I didn't get a whole lot. And then I interned at Apple. I got an interview at Apple because someone who was hiring didn't care about brand names, and she hired me for Apple. And I spent my summer at Apple. Once I spent my summer at Apple, everything I applied for full time, I got interviews. Like every single thing. Like I would sleep and just casually drop a resume in my sleep, and I'd get an interview the next day. So that's the power of brand names. So it's hard to escape, but in order to compensate for not having a brand name, the thing that you need to do is to do everything else right. So that they can't say that, oh, this guy doesn't have a brand name. He also doesn't have a great GMAT score. Oh, and the essay is okay, it's not that great. You can't let them say that. So you can say, look, I understand that it doesn't have a brand name, but that's why he's coming here. And I'm sure because he has done all of these things right, I have confidence in this guy that he will do well in recruiting. So that's how you'd go about it. But tell me more, Vashisht. What's your question?
Yeah, Souvik. So I've got three questions, if that's okay. So
No, it's not. But go ahead. I'm kidding.
all right, yeah. So my primary concern is regards to the GRE first. So I was just
Sure.
wondering if applying with the GRE, since it's fairly new compared to the GMAT,
Right.
if that would disadvantage a candidate in any way now, because your GMAT
No.
also influences your okay. Oh, so right.
No.
So
No.
okay. Right. So that's done. So my second
Per-
question is primarily coming from India and looking at a lot of the business schools abroad, because this is something I was actually actively looking at it, and this is something which I'm even looking at right now because I've not completely ruled out not applying to US. So one thing
Sure.
which I see that all the schools look pretty similar to me. Everyone's got this cohort-based experiential
Yeah.
learning system. They call it by different names, but
Hmm.
it seems essentially the same. The thing
Yeah.
that differentiates them might be with regards to placements. Like, say, if you take a look at Foster, they might get a lot of tech placements compared to, say,
Sure.
Yale does differently. So that's a
Right.
differentiator. But when people, and one thing which I observed in the spotlight was people stressed a lot on school culture, but everything from the
Yeah.
outside remains the same to me. So that's something which I
Yeah.
never got my head around. So that's the second question. The third one is a little more broad. Uh,
Sure.
I want to settle back. I want to settle down in India eventually, maybe 5 years after working in the States. Should I move there? Like, should I go
Sure.
there? Uh, I was wondering how, and I think a lot of Indian applicants have this dilemma where whether to apply to some school like an ISB or say something closer to home like an NUS, or pay the big bucks and go down to the States. So I was wondering, and since a lot of the interactions that we tend to do are people who've just graduated or are currently in the school, we don't get a
Yeah.
long-term perspective of people of what people do eventually. So I was wondering if you
Yeah.
could shed light on that, if there is
Sure.
if there are people who come back and how that works out. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Lots of different questions, and they're all good questions. So I wanted to ask Karthik, Varun, and Sanket, do you guys have these questions too? Then I'll go into more details. Otherwise, I'll try to have a use case for Vashisht only. What do you guys think? Karthik, what do you think?
Uh, no, I don't really have those questions because I eventually want to settle in India, and it doesn't really have to do anything with the countries that I go
Sure,
to.
sure. But that's good. That's sort of like looking at the probability. Sanket, what about you?
Yeah, I'm taking GRE, so probably, but you answered about GRE, not, I'm
Yeah,
not concerned with the other two questions.
yeah. So I think the GRE is fine. I mean, business schools, the GRE is actually better for some reason, because the GRE still doesn't appear in their in their ranking system. I would say that once you go into like a 740 plus, I think let's say you have a, so for example, I took the GRE. I don't know if you know, but
Yeah.
without any prep, I just wanted to like see how I do. Like I don't even know there was a calculator. I found that at the end of my test. Anyway, so I scored a 331, I think, on GRE, which equates to a 740 GMAT, right? I do think a 740 GMAT is better than a 331 GRE, even though ETS thinks that they are the same. I doubt it. So I think at the higher percentiles, I think people would prefer the GMAT. But let's say you have a 720 GMAT and you have a 330 or a 332 GRE, I would say the GRE is better, because it's just a higher percentile. Not a lot of people get that percentile. So yeah. So if you are like hovering around same percentiles, use the GMAT. If your GRE is a lot higher than your GMAT, use the GRE. Anyway, so schools are blending in. Yeah, they are. They are the same, man. Like they are all the same. Schools have, and especially if you're looking from the outside, the outside in perspective is largely similar across schools. They are great at marketing themselves as truly unique and different, but largely, I would say 80% of all school structures is fairly similar. The things that are different about schools are the things that are very obviously different. So one of those things is ranking, right? Like a school cannot say that we are number one. Not everybody can say we are number one in US news. But it doesn't matter. I think ranking, you should consider ranking in a band and not as a single number. A top 10 school is, they're all equivalent. They will all probably give you the opportunities that you're looking for. And this is more true for international students than domestic students, because domestic students have the privilege to apply to weird roles post MBA, which we don't, right? So for us, the companies are largely similar. So it doesn't matter which school you go to. The other thing that sets school apart is location, and that's something that you should consider. A school cannot say that we are located where all the consulting companies are, because they're not, and that's a really really big factor. If you want to, let's say, if you want to live in the West Coast, and you want to apply to tech, and if a school tells you that we send most of our graduates to the West Coast, and if you look at an employment report and it doesn't really agree with what they're saying, then there you go. That's a differentiator for schools. Um, the other thing also, like as you mentioned, you mentioned Foster for tech. I think Foster is more than just being in Seattle. I mean, sure, the Seattle location helps, that's for sure. But people have been going to Microsoft, Amazon, and big tech companies from Foster, not just recently. If you can date back to the 1990s, Foster has been a pretty strong program for people, for Microsoft and Amazon and all these companies to hire. And it's getting better. I've seen people getting into consulting from Foster. It's a really strong program, and I really love that program. Um, so I would say look at those things. There are some schools that are just better. Like, for example, Kellogg is my favorite business school. Again, I've never been to Kellogg, and I have no idea how it actually is. But I think Kellogg is a school that sort of does everything really well. It places incredibly well in consulting. It does extremely well in tech. I saw so many Kellogg people at Apple, Amazon. But the thing that Kellogg really does is Kellogg is the only school that differentiates between product management and product marketing. A lot of schools don't even know the difference between product management and product marketing. So the fact that they have done that research, and they know that is a valid career opportunity for students. So I like that. So I would say go to the best school that you can get to. We'll think about culture later. Culture is largely similar across campuses. I mean, sure, there are some, like, obviously there's some college town versus big city culture differences. But again, that's not a school thing. That's a geography and a location thing. So I would say don't think that the culture at Tuck is really good because they constantly talk about how close knit they are. Well, they have to be close knit because they're in Hanover. So don't listen to them. Your culture can be different. You can have a group of friends in school, and you can totally define your own culture. So I wouldn't worry about that. Awesome. Did you have any other question that I did not? Oh, right. Going back to India, something that Karthik also wants to do. I mean, there's an easy way to track this, which is LinkedIn, right? So you can set filters on LinkedIn that people who are currently in India, who are an alum of, let's say, the Ross School of Business, and you'll have a list of people who did exactly what you're describing that you want to do. And if you really want to come back to India, I think a lot of people do that. A lot of people will be forced to do that in the future, and I think it's not a bad idea at all. I think I plan to go back, not to India specifically, although I really like India and I really like Bombay. It's a great working place. But I definitely don't see myself living in the US for a very long time. So, but it stands true that you make most money in the US. So I want to earn some money, pay off my loans, and figure out what I really want to do, and then figure out where I want to be. So, and that's totally fine. Very very acceptable career transitions. Awesome.
Thank
So I
you.
think, sorry, Vashish, did you have a follow up?
Oh no, I just said thanks. That's it.
Yeah. No, for sure. So Karthik, I wanted to ask you something else. Like when you said that you are very positive that you want to go back to India, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that goal. And Sanket,
Yeah.
Varun, feel free to jump in to talk about your goals, because I want to get there too. Because a lot of people have confusions on, hey, I want to do this post MBA. Is it even feasible that we are doing that? I want to do this. And also, like, before you go, Karthik, I just want to quickly address that we're getting a ton of comments and questions Unfortunately, we don't have the time to take questions today. I want to focus on these four guys from India. But we will do follow-up sessions where you can ask me questions, but also feel free to go to GMAT Club and put your profile in the Ask Admission Consultant space. That's what it is for. You get experts weighing in on your profiles. But yeah, let me know. We'll do also an FAQ session sometime next weekend where I'll be more eager to answer questions. But I'll be very happy to get feedback in the comments. How do you think the session is doing? Would you like more things like this? So let me know in the comments, and we'll get more people in here, and we'll do more sessions like this while taking your feedback. Anyway, Karthik, go ahead.
Yeah, so after the business school, right, after I've done my MBA, I just want to jump into the real estate development sector as an entrepreneur. And unlike what a lot of people think, that starting up after a business school is not such a great idea, I had done some research, and actually it has a lot of payback period, and the return on investment through entrepreneurship is much greater than what you will do in any of the jobs in real estate. For example, in working with Tishman Spire as an analyst. So I want to start up a real estate development company in the US and India. So in India, it's a much growing market given the real estate sector is booming. Even now, if you have seen the statistics, so I'm quite positive about that particular sector. And when I start
Right.
the industry with all the connections that I have developed at the business school, that was one particular aspect to look at. And while
Sure.
looking at the business school, I was not just looking at the business school, I was also looking at the School of Public Policy, School of Law, and School of Social Work, if the schools have those. So all four aspects of these make me kind of a perfect entrepreneur in the future. And I think it
Right.
will have a greater impact on the Indian society, and government has also now started giving projects out to the private sector companies. So I think in those terms, I think in India I can be a successful one compared to the United States.
Sure. No, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. What about you, Varun? What are your post MBA goals, and do you have questions around them?
Yeah, Souvik, thank you so much for bringing that up. So, Souvik, I think when I look at my MBA goals, I would say they have really sort of organically evolved from college, because I was a computer science engineer by training, software
Sure.
developer, hands-on coder, and then I started working with Pratham, and you would be aware of it considering you're from Teach for India.
Oh
So I
yeah,
spent close to 3 years
absolutely.
doing grassroots researches with Pratham in almost every Indian state, and those are education researches. That's when I started to really understand the education landscape at the country and started contributing at the policy narratives in state and government setups. In my current
Right.
role, I'm in a in an engagement management capacity. While I'm in an engagement manager capacity, which is like a for-profit social enterprise, what I started to realize is that there are the problems that we have in the social impact space. They can't really be solved from a non-profit model. There needs to be a for-profit business model that kicks in that efficiency. And coming the bringing in the technology background that I have, what I've started to realize, and in my last few projects that wherein I work with large tech companies, say for example Google X, which is trying to solve those hard problems. What I started to realize is when you blend in technology and
Sure.
try to look at solving these large problems with maybe an element of for profit, you may have a larger traction and you will be able to solve challenges at a denominator scale. So that's the larger idea.
Right.
As a short-term post MBA goal, I want to blend in or use my technology skills. I've already done a couple of gigs as product management roles with different non-profits. I want to leverage
Sure.
on that, use the toolkit provided at a B school, and move to a project management role for, say, a large tech company like Google, design products that can impact millions, learn how to actually do that, and after that, move into my own entrepreneurial journey wherein I want to solve the problem of education and skilling using, say, AI and technology and data, basically.
Sure, that makes sense. No, cool. I'll touch on some of that, but I had a very similar background, so good to know. Sanket, what's your story? What do you want to do post MBA?
Yeah, so I have been an entrepreneur since last 6 years, but and it's kind of a boutique firm, so I have not been able to reach out to as many clients that I would want to, even though the total
Sure.
addressable market is there. I mean, my reach is quite limited. So post MBA, I have been thinking of doing product management with a big tech firm, basically to get an idea that how things work at scale, and perhaps with enough understanding with an MBA and sort of post MBA stint or as a product manager, perhaps then I can get back to
Sure.
entrepreneurship.
Right. Yeah, no. Okay. That makes sense, by the way. I think having an entrepreneurship background is really, really cool because you can talk about things in a very first-hand witness way that most of your classmates cannot. And you probably have taken decisions that worked well or not well for you, while on a very executive level, even at a smaller scale. But I think that's super helpful. So Varun, just quick feedback, not feedback, but I had very similar goals, right? So I talked about, I did ed tech work a lot after Teach for India. So I wanted to write about, when I applied to business schools, I did talk about joining an ed tech company, which I did at Apple. I was working on their productivity and education software. And then I also wanted to chat about like how I wanted to come back or do entrepreneurship, and I realized that I'm very jaded by social impact. I want to be as far away from social impact as I possibly can. Not because I don't like it. It's just that I've spent 5 years there. I want to do other stuff. I want to be more retail or be more consumer focused. So, but you can totally do that. You can totally do what you're doing. Get a gig at Google, build products, learn that experience, and then do whatever you want. And so I would. So I would be cool with that. I think so would admissions people be. And Karthik, I think what you mentioned about coming back to India to do to do real estate, I think that's totally fine. I will say one thing though, like unless you're going to a top 5, top 10 school, um, network in India might be a little bit limited. Like for example, if you go to let's say Michigan or Kellogg or Booth, they have a ton of alums in India, and I'm sure a lot of them work for real estate. So you can leverage some of that. You can get them to join you, or like you can get them on your board and stuff like that. But if you go to, for example, Emory, um, because Emory is a smaller class, it's a newer program. It's going to be tricky to find alums in India who went to Emory and are doing real estate because there's just a lot of filters and the funnel gets narrower. But if you're in the US and you're doing real estate and you went to Emory, you're going to be able to find a lot more people from Emory in the US because they more people from Emory work in the US than in India or in Asia. So just think about that a little bit. So track people on LinkedIn and to see some of their career trajectory before you make those choices. And Sanket, like I completely understand like being an entrepreneur and like having challenges of entrepreneurship. A lot of people go to business school from an entrepreneurship background because they wanted to do more or they wanted to do something different. You mentioned tech and product. I think it's totally achievable, especially if you have a coding, not coding, but if you have a more like an architecture background, it becomes a lot easier for people like you to crack like a Google interview or an Amazon interview or an Apple interview, because that's one of the biggest challenge for MBAs to like nail the technical interview. So so that's sort of that's what I wanted to get done today. This was a very new. We spent about 50 minutes, or definitely 10 more minutes than what I thought it would do. But happy to do more of these. If you guys want to come back on YouTube, just let us know. I am not as involved in GMAT Club as I would on a daily basis. So there are other people, you know them. So just PM them. Workout is probably the best resource to reach out to. I'm just going to quickly check on some of the questions that I'm looking at. Can't do really profiles, but I just want to see if there is what are the odds of getting into US MBA schools with 13 years of project execution experience? It's going to be tough. 13 years is pushing it. Like you're in the mid 30s category. So you're sort of pushing the boundaries of what business schools are really good at. So I would say look at other programs, look at part-time programs, executive programs that might be more suited for you. I'm just going to get maybe 2 more questions. Architect, planner. If I don't have a good work experience but a good GMAT score around 70 to 760, how far does it restrict me to aim for top business school? I mean, to be honest, like a lot of work experience in business school is really subjective. I see a ton of people who worked in totally no-name companies but had great test scores and had gotten in. So I think I would. It sounds awful, but business schools, I think, in my opinion, are more forgiving to bad work experience than bad test scores. It's just sad, but it is what it is. All right, so we're going to close, but if you guys have any last questions that I could quickly answer, that'll be fine. I think we can do maybe 3 more minutes before we close. Karthik, I see you unmuted yourself, so you may have a question.
No, not a question, but I just wanted to thank you for having us
Sure.
on the YouTube session. And yeah, I am actually targeting the schools that have a broader alumni base in India and have a larger class size with realistic profiles.
Awesome. That makes sense. Well, yeah, it was great. Thank you so much for being here. It's not easy to like show your face and talk about your experiences and being sort of like in the public eye, but I don't think anybody will say, "Oh, Karthik said he wants to do real estate, but he ended up working for McKinsey." No, but it's not going to happen. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. This was awesome. We'll take some feedback from people later, and then we might change some stuff. But please let people know if you want to come back or if you want to share an update on your application journey. I would love to know. And once your apps are submitted and you're getting your interviews, I'm happy to do more focused on interview prep or application prep and help in any way I can. So I did this whole thing twice. So I have double the experience of applying to business school. But yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome. And again, thanks so much for attending. I see a ton of people came to the session. So thanks so much. We will come back with more sessions. I will do sessions on every single weekend starting next weekend. So watch out for those. Thanks again.